Let's go.
Hello, welcome back to Rantasy, where we rant about fantasy shows. We've been working through the Legends of Vox Machina Season 2, and today we are on episodes 7 through 9. So that's the Feywild to the confrontation with Kevdak. Josh, what do you think?
Hey! Oh, God. In terms of... I did enjoy these episodes. Not as much as I enjoyed the previous three. I think the previous three were definitely still the strongest contenders for like the best series of episodes. And I'm trying not to judge them by like these are like a chunk of episodes that kind of like you would watch this chunk together type thing. But I felt like it kind of dipped a little bit, and it made sense what they did with the story, but at the same time, they completely changed like the order of events that were happening.
Yeah, there were some pretty major differences from the cartoon to the stream, or I guess stream to the cartoon.
Right. So, like, where to begin? I guess episode 7.
Yeah, I guess episode 7. So at the end of episode 6, we had Vox Machina narrowly escaped Umbrasyl in the caverns of Osis's mate Kamaljiori, and we are left to assume that Kamaljiori has been deceased, and we know that Keyleth cast a spell and that Scanlan, Pike, and Grog were separated, but we don't know to what extent they were separated until this episode. So we open with Keyleth, Percy, Vax, and Vex in the Feywild, which like I'm very excited to be in the Feywild because I loved that segment of the stream.
Right. But like in the terms of the chronology, Feywild doesn't come till a good chunk later.
Well, way later.
And like it felt like for me they're kind of rearranging a little bit because the part where the final confrontation of Umbrasyl, right, was a big thing, and the Kevdak was a big thing, and technically all happens before the Feywild. I think it kind of makes sense they try to do the split here, but it was just like, oh, we are, because we saw with the previous episode, okay, the bows in the Feywild and the gauntlets are with Kevdak in Westrun. So I feel like, okay, cool. They split it up so you kind of see like two things happening at once to kind of cover more ground. So, but at the same time, the Feywild bit is like more interesting than like the other bit. I felt like the other bit was just, I don't know, it didn't really, you got more, like you had them coming back into existence, which that whole series of events was not to the stream at all.
Right. I do think that especially for Grog, Pike, and Scanlan and Craven Edge and that whole happening, I do think it was a little bit to its detriment that I didn't have Percy threatening the sword and the rest of the party also being like, Grog, come back to us.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a whole Percy standoff thing, because that's when you see like Percy get like a little dark again since. And because he's still
Craven Edge is like, I am a dark being, and Percy's like, yeah, bitch, me too.
Yeah. And I feel like
I have my own demon.
Yeah, and I feel like they kind of have like written that demon off completely, because I don't think we're gonna see that demon again.
Yeah, I don't think we're seeing Orthax.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna see any more Black Smoke. So I think maybe that was a design choice or like a storyline choice of, oh, he's gone with his demons now, right? And
which is honestly so funny because like in the Feywild, Percy is so chipper. And like, I know he's obsessed with the Feywild. I know he's nerding out, and I love nerd Percy. But it is kind of, I think back to the Percy we had in the Briarwood arc, who I know is under way more stress at, personal stress at that time. But it is also, who is this guy and what has he done with Percival?
Right. I felt like it's been such a shift of character because it looks like he's been really leading into that. I'm a noble. I'll do the democracy and doing that type of stuff
And
now.
failing epically every single time.
So I felt like his character was really just taken like. I felt like they put themselves in a box after season 1, and now they're just trying to figure out what new Pulsey is because he's not Pulsey, right?
Yeah, and I think that goes to what we've said before about the show kind of moving at such a fast clip, is that we're not on Percy's story, so we don't have time for Percy's character.
Right.
We have time for Vex, and we have time for Percy as he relates to Vex, but we don't have time for Percy as he is Percy.
Right. And I just felt like, yeah, him being all excited and like, oh yes, like you see like that like naughty side, which is like, I feel maybe they're trying to do like him like kind of gaining that like childhood like splendor again, because now that the demon's done, Westrun is like, or Whitestone is like now back in his family's hands, like he can be who he like really is.
Yeah.
A type attitude, which that's like, it makes sense of how they've kind of rushed into it, but at the same time it's just like, and the whole confrontation of Pulsey, why did you give Grog this cursed weapon? Like, this is partially on you too,
right? Which would be great considering Vex's death is also partially on Percy,
right? Because there's a
and
lot. Sorry,
like that was kind of the thing, is that they both weigh on him, because as it's sort of like Zuko in season 3 of Avatar being like, why am I so bad at being good?
Yeah, and that would be like more character development that could be easily put in there too, and it would go along with the theme of the season of Pulsey's. How does Pulsey deal with guilt? Because in the beginning of the season you had Vex die on his watch,
right,
and then now Grog is getting consumed by the sword, which I don't think
on
really
his watch.
On his watch, but I don't really think they get. In the stream, Pulsey gives gives Craven Edge to Grog, but I think Grog just kind of picks it up in the animated series and just takes it. I don't think.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and watch season 1 again to be sure, but
I felt like they kind of separated the two a little bit more, but at the same time. So, and I didn't like how we're basically like immediately going into this like, okay, Pike's bleeding out, the sword's sucking the blood out, and now we have to try to destroy this thing like right now with like little confrontation. It felt like very like, felt like the whole scene, because Grog loves the sword, or the sword has been controlling him for so long, it's binded to his soul, and this was just like,
right.
I felt like I was just like, I could have done more.
Yeah, I also think one thing about if we put Craven Edge killing Grog on Percy's watch as well, like it is in the stream, you can have a really good foil between like Pike and Vax, because Vax 100% blames Percy for Vex. 100%. He does in the stream, he does in the cartoon, and that makes sense. But it would be interesting to see if we kept that energy with Pike and Grog, and if Pike, who I can't imagine would put full blame on him, and watch her be like, it's fine, it was an accident, we didn't know.
And that would probably give him a good balance of conscience to, hey, we fuck up, but we support you type thing, versus you fuck up, we kind of throw you down, which is what Vax is doing always.
And also, which one makes him feel more guilty? Is it the person actively trying to make him feel guilty, or is it the person trying to say it really is fine?
Yeah. And because you even see that with Pike in the show, right? She's like, it's all good, buddies. Like, I'm like, I'll like, I can heal myself. It'll be okay. It was an accident. Like, not putting it any on Grog.
Even though he did stab her.
Yeah. Well, technically in like the stream too, he like threw a chain through a portal to get back in from the realm, and then kind of impaled Pike. So it wasn't
Yeah.
as
Whoops.
craven edgy, bloodlusty bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I did
Even
like,
in the cartoon, he's not going for Pike. He's going to go back in on the dragon, and then Pike has to stop him.
yes,
And that's how that ends up working out.
yeah, and so I think I like actually how like they did in the animated show battle, because that
Yeah, for sure.
I feel that's more of the consequence, which has made that episode end so dramatically, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when we pop out, we're just like, oh, the blood's killing Hall. It's okay, Grog. And then Grog's like, no, it's not okay. But I love this sword. And then he breaks it.
And then we get the blood tsunami, which had me feeling like Flynn Rider. Good sir, that is a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Like, how'd you fit all that into a teeny tiny blade?
Yeah.
Puts new meaning to blood groove. But no, speaking of that scene too, and kind of more like minor nitpicky stuff that pretty much only you and I care about, is going on a costume rant here. Pike wears white, and she is sitting in a puddle of blood in her white pants. Girl, show some respect for the textiles.
Can't get some lemon.
I'm sure prestidigitation will fix that right up, but good grief, show some respect.
Right. It was funny, like that whole series of events, and then like I don't know, it felt like, because the way that Craven Edge is taken out in the show is Keyleth banishes it to like a pocket dimension. And so it just kind of sits out, because I think at one point they thought it might have been a vestige, because it's just crazy powerful. So they want to like keep it around technically. So I do like how they're breaking it, because that feels better for Grog.
It feels more cathartic.
Right. And I feel like Grog breaking it, I think it's the whole storyline with Grog right now is, where does your strength lie? And he broke the thing that gave him strength. So I do like that aspect of it.
Oh, no, he's so skinny.
And now he's small boy. No gym. Chicken legs.
So funny.
I like it that Grog was the one to break Craven Edge. Right. Of his own free will.
Yeah, for sure.
So I did like that aspect of it.
The skinny Grog did take me like drastically by surprise. I don't hate it at all. I do think it's actually really good. But it was something that I was like, excuse me, what happened?
Yeah, I was just like, okay, what? I know it, like, he dies, but he doesn't get his muscles shrunk.
Yeah, I had to look into it. I was like, did Craven Edge like drop his strength score? Like, did that happen? And I couldn't find any evidence of that. So
no, and I feel like, again, it goes into the whole where's your strength lie arc with Grog, but he's just like a scarecrow. He's just like the whole, which, by the way, song was one of the greatest joke songs ever.
The travel one, or
yeah,
stellar,
absolutely amazing. Like, I would have had that on Spotify, because I'll like listen to it all the time.
I do have to laugh at, like, through all of that and all of the montage clips we get of them basically like trying to move Grog around. He looks like one of those like car balloon thingies.
It's just like, I just find it's just like these two gnomes are going over this wilderness with this like skinny Goliath now.
It's like, he may be skinny, but he's still a Goliath. He's still huge.
And it was just like, I like one of the parts like, I can't even drink anymore. This is worse than death. And I thought, like, okay, I feel like they impeded him somehow. But it was just funny to me of just seeing like how they went with it. I think it was good, but I was really interested to see why they split the party to do these two stories simultaneously.
Yeah. And I mind it less in the Feywild portion.
Mm-hmm.
Um but I do think there's a lot that's missing from the Craven Edge Grog arc without everyone present.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fine, but it's not what I would have picked. I would have kept them together for both. Um let's see. Is there anything else I have on Grog? I think that was all I had to say on the Grog portion. But we still have to talk about the Feywild. So
Mm-hmm.
I've always pictured the Feywild. Anytime it's been mentioned, anytime I've read about it, or just like the Fey realm in mythologies, it's always been kind of more fun. Um,
Mm.
like it's not quite so like weird and deadly. I picture it as more of a like, yeah, we're just basically like chilling around eating grapes.
Yeah, I mean, there's some mythos where, like, the elves are more like schemy,
Mm-hmm.
right, and more mischievous. So I think I like the aspect of things not being what they seem like when you saw like the mountains in the distance break up to like little pieces in front of you.
Gosh, it
I,
was so funny too because Percy's like, water drains from the mountains and makes bogs, and I'm like, Percy, Percy, I don't think natural law here works.
right, but it definitely I think they played too much into that, like it's like a drug trip type thing.
Boy, did they with
They
Keyleth and Vex too.
Yeah,
Like,
the whole
wowie
powder.
zowie.
Like I don't remember them being that incapacitated in the stream, or just like I get that some of it can be like deadly and there's a whole bunch of like mischievous things happening, but at the same time it just felt like overly things. Like, right, it was
Right.
I think the Feywild to me is more psychologically dangerous than physical dangerous, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to like play with your mind and trick you and into something that everything is what it appeals to be.
I think of it as in like you have Fey beings which are effectively immortal
Mm-hmm.
and have like no sense of time, no sense of urgency, hence the whole like, yeah, we're just chilling eating grapes idea. But I think that the danger of the Feywild is that you are dealing with creatures who are not on your timeline and do not realize what you as a human are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, people talk like, oh, all the time you have these stories of, kids being taken by the Fae.
Mm-hmm.
Like in almost every Fey realm mythos, you have something along those lines. And they're just like, yeah, we're just playing. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't realize that that kid is going to be an adult and then is going to die and has family and people that care about them that will die before
Mm-hmm.
they're done playing.
Right.
And so it's not even so much to me that like Fey realms are supposed to be deadly with, giant purple blobs and, evil vines that try to choke you and Venus flytraps that rip birds in two. It's the danger is that trickery, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
even necessarily a trick on purpose. It's that the Fae are having fun and they have no concept of what you have to do.
Mm-hmm. No, I could definitely agree with that. I think that plays, and like it's called it how to tell because like, right, like it's just so I don't know. I imagine like even how they just like showed the Feywild, it seems like it seems so different than,
Yeah.
right. And I feel like, oh, you have elves that travel there, or elves come from there. How are they not more like culture shock when they get here, right? Like, is this like if they're like traveling and like living, like it doesn't make it was too fantastical for like we know there are beings that come from the Feywild that are not this fantastical, but
Right.
that are like dealing with it, and I was just kind of like confused on that approach.
And I can understand, like, elves have Fey ancestry in D&D, and so they are from the Feywild. So this is sort of a, very deep cut homecoming for them to move Singorn there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, they don't live there. They don't travel there often, at least that we know of. And
Mm-hmm.
so at a certain point, it's like, how are you getting your food? What are you eating in this weird place?
Right.
And do you have to, like, do you have people that study this so that whenever you do possibly have to move your city to a different dimension, know that, oh, this thing that looks like a totally edible, tomato in our world is not actually an edible tomato. It will fuck you up.
Right. So I was just, I don't know. I like the aspects of it being like colorful and like the water goes upside down and stuff like that. Because they kind of that seems like it, but then all the stuff, creatures happening, drug trips, spores. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, they'll going a little over the top with it.
And I will say too, like in Vex's drug trip and talking to Trinket, the fact that Trinket's like, "Hey girl," I'm like, I was really ready for Matt's okay
Yeah,
type Trinket. And I was like, I hate this Trinket. I'm not a fan.
I did see the joke they put in with that though.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you did. I don't sound like how you thought it was gonna sound like. It's like,
Yeah, it
yeah.
sure
I was like,
did it.
yeah, no shit.
Yeah, I mean the jokes were pretty good overall in this one. I think
Mhm.
Garmili was really good. I love
Oh,
the reference to "I'm just the traveler."
yeah.
I'm like,
I get
okay.
that. I really like jumped up because I have like Billy Boyd's picture and autograph like right above my couch, and I was like, "That's Billy Boyd." I was like pointing
Yeah,
at it. I was like, "It's him. I know that
yeah.
voice."
And I think he did amazing. Like
Oh,
I could listen to Billy Boyd as Garmili all day.
oh, absolutely. Like I was like, it makes so much sense, right? It fits so well with us, like
It does. It
his
does.
characters and like how Gargamel is. And I was just like, I was happy with that casting because I was wondering who was going to play
100%.
Gargamel, but I was just once I heard that voice, I was like, yes, perfectly cast.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of voices, I have two notes on our dragons, which is I can listen to Thordak say bubbles for years. Just the word bobbles. So good. But then I also have a note on Umbrasyl being this is one of many talking about Mythcarver, and then talking to Ripley saying Thordak's plan will reveal itself in time.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're both Matt Mercer. They do not sound like this. Those two lines do not sound like the same person.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
And
no,
it's so weird because normally with Matt, I'm like, Matt, found him. And like he throws his voice in so many different ways that it's like this is definitely a different character, but this is also definitely Matt.
yeah,
Umbrasyl, I'm like, hey Matt, what happened?
yeah, no. I definitely think he went all out for Umbrasyl
All in.
because those sometimes I think it took me a hot second to recognize Umbrasyl even as Matt.
Right, me too.
Because I was just like, that sound like who is that? Then I looked up, I was like, oh, it's Muscle. I was like,
Yeah, it's like I should have known.
I was like, he like really like got that like guttural, deep,
Mm-hmm.
that like acidy like
Yeah.
spillage. Like I was just like, Matt, wow.
Right. And like flashing forward a little bit, like Dr. Dranzel and
Mm-hmm.
Artigan both. I'm like, Matt,
Matt,
the guard in Singorn, Matt.
yeah.
Like, there's so many where it's just like, it's I spot the Matt. Take a shot every time you hear Matt Mercer.
Mm-hmm.
Although with Umbrasyl, I might not be taking as many shots as I should because I can't always hear that it's Matt.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree. I think that's a nice thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really sort of made Umbrasyl feel more villainous to me.
Yeah, and he's
Because I
not.
will say it is hard to hear Matt Mercer and just be like, that's the bad guy, because Matt is such a well-intentioned, good-hearted soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though he like kicks ass as Silas, it's like it's still Matt.
Yeah, and I do think it's
But
a good.
Umbrasyl, I don't have that.
I think it's a good way to say, because he has so many cameos and so many side voices in the show
Mhm.
that this voice is so distinctly not him,
Right.
gives it so much more villainous and
Yikes. Yeah.
yeah, like the EBGBs, right? So I was even now, like, if I try picturing like the voices, like Umbrasyl does not sound like Matt until like you get like this, like that one word or two, you were like, okay,
Found him.
yeah.
But yeah, the only other things I have on this episode are actually like little small pieces of praise, which is the development with Pike and Scanlan. Very cute.
Very cute.
And as much as I don't really care for the drug trips that Keyleth and Vex go on, I do like that in Vex's drug trip, there's a little psychedelic heart over Percy.
Oh, I saw
It's
that
like,
when I was rewatching it this morning. I was like, oh, that's so cute.
it's cute. And I think it really helps in the next episode, which I had a few things that I was really excited for that fell flat for me, but we'll get to those
Ooh.
here in just a second. But we arrive in Singorn and we open with this guy shopping for nice melons, and I was like, really?
Mm-hmm.
Like that feels like them getting a good kick out of that because they talked like that around the table, and I was just like, okay, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
I love the design of Singorn, but I do feel like the exterior of the buildings was maybe a little lackluster. It kind of
Yeah,
felt more Hobbit than Elven to me. The interiors looked great though.
interiors definitely. When I think of elf structures, it's definitely more tree, less roots,
Yeah, agreed.
right? And I felt
Whereas
like it.
hobbits are more roots, right?
Yeah, yeah. They're more like into the adults, and this felt more like, I don't know. I felt like more like they had like the nice greenery, the vines, some branches going around everywhere,
The
and it.
arcane light fixtures.
Mhm. But like this, like the streets kind of felt like, if I was like in my head, like it's like a human city with some nature thrown into it,
Yeah,
right?
it was okay.
Yeah, and I think they won't really try to play its importance. The study, though, I would do so many unspeakable things to have a study like that.
Yeah, the study like Sildor's study and the ivy pattern on Wilhan's front door. Those two things, I'm like, now I'm not saying I'd commit a crime.
But I'm not guilty. Oh no, I
I'm not
definitely
saying I wouldn't.
no,
Go ahead.
definitely felt, yeah, the outdoors of Fangorn was just like, oh, okay, well, just kind of passing through. They didn't really put it in too much to it, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay. I was like okay with it because I knew we weren't gonna be that long.
Right, but it still is disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but while we're in the study, we have one of the iconic lines of "They are not worth you,"
Oof.
which I felt fell flat for me.
Yeah.
Um, it's because I mean, Vex is my girl. I
Mm-hmm.
love Vex. I love Vex and Percy, and that to me is a line that really, really stuck with me when I was watching the stream. And so I feel like Taliesin kind of sped through it, or either that or the editing cut it a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that the frame is like out, it doesn't feel like this intimate moment. It feels like I just walked in on a, conversation that is okay.
Right. Yeah. I definitely agree. I felt like, because that's such like, because we knew kind of like they had a thing going on like in the stream, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like I really at like this moment, we kind of see the feel like the feelings are definitely mutual, and like how he like sticks up for her, and then like this moment is very intimate in the stream as well, and it's kind of just kind of said.
Yeah.
So I was just like,
We don't even get like a quick handhold. We don't get Vex's
sorry.
reaction to him saying that. Like we get nothing, and it's just it feels very impersonal.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the delivery and because of the way that particular frame is animated.
I definitely agree. I think that could have been better done, because I think that's like, it depends on that, if how the direction they're going to, but like end of the campaign, they're like basically going to be, they get married basically at the beach, and like this is kind of like we're heading that way, and this is when
Yeah.
they really start. And especially like even in the next episode, we see like those feelings there, but they kind of just like blew by it. And I was just like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I honestly feel pretty similar about My Heart Is Someone Else's.
yeah,
I feel
that
like that one is also at Speedy McSpeederson, and like hey, I'm glad she's punching him, but that a punch doesn't feel like Vex.
uh,
Like not in that moment anyway.
no, not in that moment. But I definitely can see that. But I agree with that. Because it's, I mean, she's like lured in with this, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, my heart belongs to someone else. And it's like, okay, well, you guys are not showing it that well, right? You haven't been, yeah,
Yeah.
haven't really built, like, you saw like the little like you've alluded to it with all these things. You kind of hinted
Mm-hmm.
at it, but you haven't seen the characters like you haven't seen like Keyleth blushing type thing on either of them, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah. I
you
mean,
haven't seen. Sorry.
like I mean they do sort of set it up a little bit in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Darling take the mask off, and
Mm-hmm.
there's several moments where again it's alluded to. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as season 2 goes, we get the acid trip Heart over
Mm-hmm.
Percy, which I don't think counts. Like this is a fun thing that we're going to actually explore later. This is not the setup.
Mm-hmm.
This does not exist in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
We have They Are Not Worth You, which fell flat. We didn't get a reaction out of Vex for that. So I can't really count that as foreshadowing for My Heart Is Someone Else's. And then we get the moment before they go into the bog, you know, in the tree in the bog down
Yeah.
in the valley-o.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives her the spiky thingy.
Yeah.
And a good scene, but that is about as much as we've gotten in this episode and in this season so far
Mm-hmm.
of them being a couple.
Right.
Because most of Percy's big character scenes have been with Vax, not Vex.
Mm-hmm. No.
So to then just kind of get that, I sort of felt like the Archfey, what's his name? Starts with an S. I should have wrote that down. Sondor, there we go.
Yeah.
I sort of feel like Sondor getting punched in the face, like, what? Okay.
Right. And it's, I don't know, like you have like the whole title business, which was like even that.
The fact that Sildur's like, that's an obvious ploy. I'm like, so is the title not real? Because it was super real in the stream. Excuse what?
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like I don't know, it just seemed things were just falling flat.
Yeah, like the title
Yeah.
line was good, but then Sildor basically like pulled the rug out from under it, being
Mm-hmm.
like, well, that's fake.
Right. I
And
mean,
if he said, I'm not changing it for a meaningless title, that would have been fine.
yeah.
But to then say, such an obvious ploy is beneath you, I'm like, so are we not going to get the Grey Hunt part?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So yeah, I just felt like
don't mention it.
I know. At all. Which is
Yeah,
crazy.
I'm sorry for springing the title on you. I still don't know if it's a real one or not, dude.
Exactly. But it's just like, I'm trying to think of like the battle sequence, phenomenal.
Yeah, the flips all over the tree. Keyleth turning into the flame elemental and tree striding through the tree monster.
Jeez. Beautiful.
So good. Keyleth is the best.
Yes. I was just like, and she's like, and that's how you fight a tree. I was like,
Absolute goat.
yes. And then like, I know, and like how they basically like dispatch him is just with the barbed arrow that Pulsey gives Hole, which is like kind of like a nice moment.
It would be nicer if the other ones before it had been.
Right. I felt like if other ones had been nicer, it would have been made more sense. But it's just like, oh, he just gave us something, and then it became useful. And now she's got a really cool bow.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. The fact that Sildor was more interesting to me than what was going on with Percy and Vex.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that he says, you know, it's the least I can do for family. The fact that that line hit harder than any of the Percalia lines.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way he says for family, I was like, ooh, he's such a bitch. I love him.
Yeah, like it's like, and I was just like, oh, I'm sure your father like be so pleased, and just like coughs. I was just like, yes, yes.
Perhaps I would have been.
Yeah, like it's like yes, this super douchey father figure elf that
he's so good.
That part was great, and I can see that relationship set up better with Vex, and then you have that played on with the evil. I forget what the tree guy's name is.
Sondor. That was Sondor. Neither of us remembered it off the bat.
I mean, he's there for a little bit, but like how I think that pillow they were played with stronger. This like father approval, which like, yeah, it's all right. And then like you kind of see like, oh, I don't need to go see him. Like I don't think I'm ready yet. I was like, oh, you were ready to like punch him in the face, and now you're like,
right.
So
just like I don't know if I want to do that.
And the whole but like he was, I know, like when Sondor goes like the whole like really nice line of just, oh, sweet broken Vexalia. Like I was just like, ooh, that hits. I thought that part of I feel like this episode could be best described as Vex's arc getting like hyper accelerated and everyone else is kind of being there.
Yeah, I mean, we get her whole arc in one episode and that's it.
Yeah, we go through like father, like daddy issues, like, oh, this guy's kind of like cute type thing. Oh, I get this cool bow and I have to like fight over my daddy issues to get this bow.
Right.
And it's just like, it could have, I felt like there was more build up. I feel at the same time, the spotlight was all on Hull. So they wanted to have that more overcoming Hull personal issues rather than involving the romanticism of Pulsey, which is part of the reason why she gets over her daddy issues is because of Pulsey. So it's just like, okay, you took away from something else to kind of focus on it, but these things were too more correlated than you thought.
Like one thing I will say about Sondor in particular, because I mean I'm totally with you in that. It's just Vex getting over the daddy issues, and like as someone with daddy issues, like that's why she's my girl. Like I get it. But I will say one thing I really.
So I was about to spit out my wine. I was like, oh god.
Don't do that. That'd be very sad. Some good grapes have died for that wine. But one thing I really did like about Sondor is his design. Do you know who I'm talking about when I say Stephanie Law?
Yes.
Okay. For those that don't, let me present this is some art from Stephanie Law. She does mostly like fairies and mermaids and stuff like that, and she was also like the guest of honor artist at Dragon Con last year. So she's like super good, super cool. She has this book called Green Dreamscapes, and her how to draw section on like Archfey and High Fey, so like Titania Oberon level Fey. Sonder was very reminiscent of that for me. Like I was getting core memory stuff out of his design.
I definitely, yeah, his, from how his like study is shows, it's like the natural, but it's hard to make natural things look good or elegant, right? Because like it's a tree, how much more can the tree be things? But his office is like a tree. It's like, oh, this is like the finest wood, and all these books, and this like big opening, and this like grandeur. Like he definitely seems of like that very elderly elf, right? Like he's been around for like thousands of years type thing, and it shows, right? Because he looks old. Like he looks a little worn.
He looks ancient,
right? And he like, so you're just like, elves are for like ever, and he looks this old, and it's like it felt like he had that presence. And I think it was the twins definitely downplayed it because obviously they see him as the dick, and Pulsey is trying to be like noble, like the noble, like, oh, what can I do? Like trying to talk to someone.
The fact that Sildor was like, it's like, oh Lord, tell me more.
Yeah, yes, low develop the
as soon as the title was dropped.
Yeah, what can I do for you? But I felt like it was almost like in like a mocking way of like, oh, your human titles, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
It was
and it was unclear if the title meant more or the fact that he was a human meant less.
I think it kind of harkens to like, oh, these meaningless tiles. Oh, it's beneath you, Devolo. It's like kind of that whole segment of your titles mean nothing because you're just a blimp on my map right now.
Yeah, you're so short-lived.
Yeah, this is just beneath you because it's just you're trying to insult me, and it's just like you cannot reach to my level to insult me. So I think I think that he was like almost kind of playing with Pulsey in that aspect.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, what can I do for you, little human, right?
Yeah, no, Sildur's such a bitch.
Oh yeah.
One last thing I have back on Sondor is the fact that Garmelie calls it his sadness. He's like, don't listen to the voices and he won't be drawn in by his sadness. And we didn't really get to like learn anything about his backstory, why he's cursed, why he's trapped in this tree, which I think is a very compelling story that one can explore from the stream. I think it really is very sad. And so I do like that Garmelie at least called it his sadness because I think it made him more empathetic, even though the show did not explore that.
Yeah, and I think you do see a little bit of it. It's like you can't leave me, and it kind of like shows that kind of like that lashing out of things. Like you kind of can like sees like, oh, he is like definitely hot, and that sadness is there, and he turns it into the rage given. But like you don't know why really.
Yeah.
So like
we're only left to infer.
So like I felt it would have been cool if while they were like connecting, they would see some part of his backstory while it was showing some of Vex.
Yeah, agree.
I think that could have been a cool like, so you see why, and that way she could be more empathetic to him.
I think what would have been very interesting is if we'd gotten clips of his own backstory, and then when he says, all I need is your heart, we see flashback clips of her and Percy that parallel Sondor and his lover.
I like that.
I think that would have been killer. And then my heart is someone else's just, yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think, ooh. Yeah, because that would completely, like, I think that would have made it like, oh, she's in love with Pulsey, right?
Mm-hmm. And at that point, because I remember like watching the stream, and I didn't really know it at that point that Percy liked her back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember hearing "My Heart Is Someone Else's" and kind of being like, ooh.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that even if in the stream or in the cartoon we don't have it confirmed that Percy loves her too, I think that shows a lot of growth on Vex's part because she has to be accepted. That's the whole thing, and why
Mm-hmm.
she has those daddy issues, because she was never just accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think saying "my heart is someone else's" without knowing if that person returns those feelings is
Mm-hmm.
huge growth for her.
You're right. Because I feel like,
Excuse me, I'm taking myself to therapy. Bye.
But no, because like you kind of see, like they will attempting for Pulseed, right? He gives her like the gift, like this is what I made this to think of. Oh, so like his like love language is like crafting and giving something that they might find useful, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
he's definitely a giver.
Yeah, but like Vex is definitely like words of affirmation, and she is like she needs to hear it, and she hasn't yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like if she could see it and then like kind of recognize it in herself that she does, like with that parallel that you were saying about if they did have that flashback and everything, that would have made it so much more of she acknowledges her feelings and accepts them for what they are rather than being judged for them.
Exactly.
Let's just go to therapy now.
Yeah, right. Like, I kind of called myself out more than I meant to just there. But anyway, that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on episode 8.
And here's another thing: we didn't even really talk about Wilhelm.
Well, they're barely there.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was just like, Wilhelm is. Oh, first of all, look who they got for Wilhelm.
Henry Winkler.
How?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Like, I was just like, I like literally paused it for a second. I was just like, yeah, looked up like who it was. I was just like, how the because it's perfect, right? Mm-hmm. I thought a perfect old grandpappy wink like voice and like things, like it makes so much sense. But I was just like, I want more Wilhelm. I know there's more in this stream.
I mean, the good news is that we get more of Henry Winkler Wilhand in the next episode.
That is true.
Where we open on a nice, peaceful farming village. Surely nothing bad will happen here.
Oh, God. But yeah.
Proceed to invade with all the Goliaths.
Right. No, I just think, like, the whole... You can see, like, some banter with, like, Scanlan and Pike... And Grog's is like, oh, and then he gets his suppository, but I was just like, oh God, it's like you really this part of the story just kind of gets like completely like overshadowed by the Feywild stuff. So it kind of was just like, then why did we split it up so much if we're just gonna do one thing and then another thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we only get Wilhelm's house, and then we get the you know who has the gauntlets? This will be easy.
Mm-hmm.
Mikey, first of all, come on. When has anything ever been easy? But then we go into an episode that has literally 0 of our Feywild crew.
Mm-hmm.
Completely 0. I watched it this morning. They're not there. The whole episode.
Yep.
Wild to me.
Yeah.
But we do get Grog's flashbacks to where he met Wilhand.
Which is huge, and you get this, and I do like how they actually got to explore that.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that I now have questions on is the fact that he's like, Wilhand's old, he's unarmed, he has a family, and I'm like, hey, Grog, you and your crew have killed multiple people who are unarmed, old, and have families.
Right. It felt
multiple people.
I felt like it was just like it was just Wilhelm, right? Like
I guess because he saw the photo.
right? And it was just like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it could have been, because I don't know. 'Cause do we even like know in the stream why he spelled Wilhelm in the first place? Was there even another reason besides of just cause?
I feel like it was pretty much just cuz, and it plays into Grog's whole like I don't want to kill for no reason.
Mm,
But that kind of rings a little hollow seeing the flashback where he's like throwing axes up on top of a roof.
yeah,
And
like
like sure, they are firing at him, but you also invaded their home.
yeah, like he's full just Raider Berserker mode right now, and then all of a sudden just gets automatically stopped by this old man with a picture of his great great granddaughter.
Yeah, I mean that to me just feels kind of like the plot requires it.
Mm-hmm.
Um I don't I don't know if that was supposed to be his first raid because the flashback is broken
Mm-hmm.
up with the initial invasion, and then we get like a contemporary conversation happening right now, and then we go
Mm-hmm.
back to how he met Wilhand.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if those are supposed to be the same raid or if they're supposed to
Right.
be two different ones. And if it's two
Right.
different ones, then I have that many more questions of like, hey Grog, then what was the problem with the other ones?
Right. So maybe it was his false raid, and then he was just like, "Oh, this guy does not try to shoot at me with or kill me."
Yeah. And obviously we don't know who like killed the woman who was running from them. Like we know Kevdak kills the first one.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know who kills the other ones, and there's plenty of other people running, and it's kind of it stands running away.
Right.
And so then we get the shot with him and Zanror, and he's like, he's not a fighter, and it's like neither were half the people in the village you just massacred.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that it's just you and your cousin now, but
Yeah,
where was this energy?
I definitely think this section was just a plot point, right? Like we need to figure out why Grog left for his backstory,
Mm-hmm.
and this was just like, oh, it's just because he didn't kill Wilhelm.
Yeah.
So and kind of
know.
it just kind of translates like what was so special about Wilhelm that made him stop, and it's just like
Yeah. That is the question that I have. One other question I have from that flashback is we see Brunette Pike.
We do see Brunette Pike, and
and we have not discussed why her hair is white.
I had to tell my partner why her hair was white, because I was like, I wonder if they're going to bring this up, because this was a big moment that happens pre-stream.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like solidifies the Mighty Nine as the Mighty Nine.
Yeah. Or the Vox Machina.
Oh, Vox Machina, not Mighty Nine. I'm only thinking ahead. Solidifies Vox Machina.
We're just so ready for the second series.
I'm so ready. It's like now, so I was like, yes, can't wait. But yeah, I was just like,
yeah, I wonder.
I was like, Brunette Pike.
Yeah, who's this? Who's this?
Right?
No, we've never seen before.
Right? No eye scar. Brunette.
Which the scar part makes sense to me. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hair that I'm like, this makes this look like a totally different character.
Mm-hmm.
What's up? What are we gonna do about this? Are we just gonna say she's old now because she's a gnome and therefore her hair is turned white because telomeres and stuff? Or are we gonna go into the trauma that she went through after dying?
Yeah. So that would be interesting, because we didn't get to see any of that in the fall season when she was going through a whole spiritual reawakening type thing, right?
Yeah, which would have been the perfect place for it.
Right. So that would have probably been an easier throwback. But I don't know if we're gonna see that again.
Yeah. And I guess the reason we didn't see it in season 1 is because we didn't know if we were getting a season 2. Because I think it had gotten released and very quickly they were like, yes, season 2, baby. But I think they wanted to see how the first one sold.
I thought after the Kickstarter was a success, they guaranteed 3 seasons.
That might be right. In which case, then I have no excuse for them.
Yeah. because there was talk when the Kickstarter was announced that the pre-stream thing would be that episode of Pike dying. That because that'd be like the because that's the adventure everyone wants to see, right? Because that's
right, yeah,
a big moment because it gets referenced back so much later. So that was gonna be like the idea of the 30-minute thing was that eventual. But then everything else happened and it blew up, and then they had to switch it to what it is now.
right,
Which is good, which we already talked about that. But yeah, it's interesting to see just like Brunette Pike without having that context. Because if you know it, you're like, oh my god, that's such a good like. This is before it all.
It's an Easter egg.
Yeah, but then you're like, you go like, well, are they actually gonna talk about that or?
Yeah, it's kind of like going back to season 1 where my sister who's never seen the show texted me and was like, "Are Vex and Vax?" I was like, "No, they're not. Trust me, like they're not."
Nope.
I mean, not that that's like an Easter egg, since that's like very strong character development for them, but there is sort of that difference between if you've seen it versus if you haven't.
Right.
But. So, but then we get into West Run, like actually inside West Run. I don't have a ton of notes here, just for the simple reason that everything happening in the back half of that episode is set up for what comes in the following 3.
Yeah.
We get introduced to Kaylee, which that's going to go somewhere. And we meet Zanror again, in the present, and his relationship with his dad Kevdak. And that's definitely going to go somewhere. We get the buildup of Grog and them getting everybody out, and then him going back, and that's going to go somewhere. So pretty much everything in this back half is the next episode. I guess we can talk about it.
Yeah, I definitely feel like this was more of a, like, you see some bit with Kaylee, right? Like that's like a little like side hint to things happening later.
Well, from what I've heard, it figures you'd run. I'm like, Scanlan, you need to be picking up on the draw here. Like,
but it definitely just feels like more of a setup episode for that confrontation with Kevdak and Grog, which is weird that we're going straight into this. Is basically that was the whole point, like, of him is like, oh, he's just being weak, and now like he stopped at Wilhelm and they didn't really do too much. Now he's just going, I'm gonna go run in and fight Kevdak now.
It does sort of, like, I'm not opposed to seeing more Henry Winkler. However, it does beg the question of why did we have that scene?
Right. Like that.
And I know Wilhelm says that the butt pill got rid of your corruption. What corruption? I thought that Pike healing him, bringing him back to life, and the breaking of the sword was the getting rid of the corruption part.
Right, because so in the stream, Pike casts Greater Restoration to separate Craven Edges from Pike's soul. Right. So I don't know if Holy Suppository is the equal thing of a Greater Restoration spell. So I was like, okay, he's cured from it, and in terms of like D&D magic, he should be just fine, right? Like this whole muscle thing is just kind of more for show.
It's just comedy.
Yeah. And now
I figured that him being a noodle was more because he's used to having muscles to hold himself up with. And there is now so much grog and so little muscle that he has to basically learn how to walk again.
Right.
Not he's got some latent corruption from Craven Edge left over. That's I don't know, it's just weird.
Yeah, I definitely think the whole giving Grog small arms. I feel like they're leading heavily into that whole where's your strength thing, and I think this is gonna happen in like the final fight, that it's gonna pop out or something like that. Like he's gonna go like full rage mode, and then something's gonna happen, and he's gonna be like, oh, my friends, I need to protect them, and then get his strength back, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how it's going. Like it's like, oh, he's gonna have this thing,
Mhm.
and then that's how it's looking like it. And I'm just like, I can see this already, like 2 episodes out.
Yeah.
So it's just, I was just like, I wish it was just a little bit more, you know, present. And then we don't even have the other crew there at all. Like we don't even see them like
Right.
arriving. So it's just kind
Yeah.
of like,
We don't get a single second of them this episode. So,
which is just like okay, because you
which,
spent so much time with them, but at the same
yeah.
time,
And it does sort of beg the question. So much is happening in West Run. You're kind of like, so how are they getting there? How are they going to find their friends and get there in time?
right? Because
I'm waiting for Pokeball Grog, baby.
Pokeball Gog. But yeah, but no, because the portal from the Feywild is just like this will take you back to Teldore. Okay,
Where?
in Teldore?
That's like saying, it's like, this will take you back to the States. It's like, okay, but I have to be in Nashville, not Phoenix.
Right. So it's, I mean, they have keyless, so I guess they could like tree stride or something.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be fine, but it is kind of
like it's still kind of like
vague
because they don't even know where they went, right? Because they got separated in
Mm-hmm.
the spell. So like, how would they even know where to go at all?
Yeah. I will say that West Run is very gloomy, and it's gloomy in such a way that is not just because the dragon's there and just because the herd is there, even though that is part of the design choice for sure. But the fact that it's called West Run implies that it's on a river, which means it would probably be very misty. And so I don't know. It for me, the design of West Run really does hit as like where Vox Machina got started, like where they all came together and formed the group and became the friends and party that they are. So
Yeah.
I like that it is kind of going to be a homecoming once everyone gets there. I don't think we're going to visit that as a concept.
Right, because you see like Scanlan before he goes in is just like, oh yeah, I played dozens of gigs here. It's like
That's
this is
it.
where it's like this is where you guys all met was restaurant.
Right.
Right. Like you guys should be like familiar. Pike, you live like on the outskirts with
I
Windhelm for a
know.
while. And like guys, like what
It is very strange how pretty almost everywhere they go, it's like we've never been here before.
but like they have.
Yeah. Like we don't know anywhere that's on our continent. It's like, listen, I know this isn't the modern day, but I've never been to LA. Google that shit. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And like how long has Scanlan been alive? Or like the twins
Right.
and all these other people? Like you guys know these places, right?
Yes.
It's just
Some of y'all have some time under your belt,
yeah, like you don't have to be like, oh
especially
yeah,
Scanlan.
especially Scanlan. But like it's just like you guys know this. You don't have to like almost like play dumb. I'm like, oh, this is a new area because the audience doesn't know about it. We can reference it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. So I think they'll just kind of play like, oh, the audience doesn't know about this new place. And they just know of it as the whole is there. So we gotta make it seem like they don't know. But it's like, no, they're like they were there for a long while.
But again, the show is not taking the time to revisit these things. And so for Pike to be like, wow, it feels weird to be back where we all met without the whole crew, that would require the show to revisit it later, which they're not going to do because they're not allowing themselves that amount of time.
Right. So I don't know.
But we'll see. I'm excited for the next 3. Because all the setup is good, and I know what's coming is supposed to be good, so I'm very excited for the next 3. Although that does mean that the season is over and
sadness.
Then what are we gonna do?
I don't know. I guess find something else to rant about. I guess.
Yeah. Absolution.
I'll be done.
But anyway, that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
No, like I said, I think my biggest gripe to recap was just they tried to split it up to save time, but they really didn't save any time, and they just kind of pushed something that had Olio to be later for more climatic ending for the season, I guess. Which makes sense, but at the same time, it's just like, why split up people in that dramatic fashion if people are not going to be doing stuff the whole time?
Right.
I mean, maybe it focuses on certain characters more because you have less people to focus on. But at the same time, it's just like there were some cool moments that kind of fell flat.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I guess we'll leave off with "Don't you know you dance with the party." Goodbye, everybody.
Take care.